Hello and welcome to the video. So this is 5 things that I learned trying to find funding in the UK in 2024. That may well help you as you go into 2025 if you are looking for funding. However, full disclosure, spoiler alert, I didn't find any funding in 2024. However, these are the things that I learned from experience. And the reason why I think this might help you is because when I was looking in 2024 at other people's videos, it kind of seemed to me like a lot of people hadn't actually tried to get funding, particularly in the UK. And they were just basically making a video on what you should do from a broad perspective. So number 1, government funding programs, which was something I was trying to get into, one of them in particular. I won't go into much detail in this video. If this video does well, I might release a longer video that I've already filmed, but the video, it ended up being about an hour long, so I'm trying to keep this nice and short. So the upshot with the funding programs in the UK is that they'll only give you funding in a very, very narrow band, it at least seemed to me. Now, I was trying to get into a military funding program in particular, although I did try and look at a broad amount of funding programs. Mine being for powered armoured exoskeletons, like the version you can see before me, which you can obviously look at and say it's high risk and everything, but it is also an up and coming field. And what I typically try to do is, if I was ringing up different people or different times, I would kind of say I was doing something slightly different, skew it, say it was for medical purposes or just for development, whatever it is, to make it essentially sound less high risk. However, it didn't seem to matter, and they weren't actually ever seemed to be put off by the project itself. And this is where the more narrow bands come in. So for example, they might only offer funding to you if they're going to see short-term economic benefit in the local area. They might only offer funding to cover part of a machine cost. For example, if you need an expensive machine buying, then they might cover, say, 50% of it, but then you've sort of still got to cover the other 50% of it. Other funding programs might not want to cover time, or they'll only cover time, but only the time of the employees, not of you, the founder, or of any other costs. Which brings me on to the main issue that I found with the funding programs, and that is basically they don't really like a sole trader, they don't like someone on their own. So while I thought a sticking point of any funding program would be the actual project I'm doing myself, that didn't seem to be the case. What seemed to be the case is as soon as they realised that I wasn't from academia or from a well-established company already, all of the funding programs weren't interested at all and were basically trying to make any excuse they could to put the phone down on me. Which, if you're essentially trying to get development pre-seed funding to start a new company and compete, is obviously a problem. Which brings me on to point number 2, which is general behaviour, i.e. the pessimistic British behaviour. This is possibly one of the biggest issues that I came across with trying to find funding, and it's that there is literally no optimism at all. There is generally no belief at all that anything is possible outside of the norms. And the problem with this is it goes right down to the person who's answering the phone to you. So when you ring all these different programs or help centres or whatever it is, most of the time you're dealing with someone who is completely pessimistic of whatever you're doing, no matter what you say you're doing. Because again, I tried to change what I was doing because I thought it might be the project itself that I was doing as to why they'd be pessimistic, but it wasn't. You have this general pessimistic behaviour from the person on the phone who's just trying to put the phone down on you. Every now and again, you'll get someone who's really good and really tries to help you, but that'll typically involve them trying to put you through to someone else who won't be helpful, so you're back to square one. Now, when everyone behaves like that, particularly when they realise you're not from academia or a well-established company and they just try to put the phone down on you, that makes it extremely difficult to even get past the first person on the phone to a person that could actually help you, to a person or to a network that could pass you on to someone else and someone else where you might actually get somewhere with it. Which leads me off onto number 3, which is startup help schemes. There's various startup health schemes in the UK that you can join, where you can get help from someone who's employed by a council or by some form of regional help centre. These can be helpful and you can learn from them, but to be honest, you come into the same problem as number 2, which is general behaviour of pessimistic British, which naturally think a lot of things can't be done. But to add to that, what you seem to get out of a lot of them is they want you to listen to them entirely, but them not to listen to you. Now, the problem is with that, if you're trying to do something new or something that they basically just don't know about, which is going to be most things because most of the people work in these types of positions, haven't actually had a business, or maybe they did in some random field that you're not in. So either way, the dynamic of this startup help scheme that exists basically needs to be 2 ways. So you need to listen to them as the person coming to them for advice, but at the same time, they need to listen to you, because if they're going to give you bad advice. In my mind, this is pretty obvious, but frankly, it's 50-50 on whether they do that. I got some really good people that really tried to help, and then I got some that basically just ended up ignoring after a while because they were expecting me to do everything that they say and they wouldn't listen to anything that I said at all, even though I was saying something that would mean the entire thing would fail. And number 4 is angel investors and venture capital in general. These, I'd say, are probably the best way to get funded, even though of course it didn't work for me. The problem with venture capital and angel investors is there is basically too many people looking for investors to how many investors there actually are. So try to get in contact with them, number 1, is extremely difficult. You can send out hundreds of emails, as I did, and you basically get no responses. You're not really getting the response rate that you need to eventually get a yes. So I naturally went into this thinking, well, if I send out 100 emails, I might get 10 back. And then out of that 10, there might be 1 maybe. But the reply rate you're going to get isn't even remotely that. And then because there's so many people wanting investment, while there's so little investors, you've got 2 things that go on. The price of investing essentially is driven down, so there's less money being offered for a higher percentage of the company. At a time where money doesn't go anywhere near as far as it used to do, so it then makes the investment worth even less. And then that is also coupled with the fact that because there are so many people wanting investors, they can basically pick and choose. So unless your company is already really financially profitable, already in business, got really good numbers, the chances of you getting taken on is very, very, very slim, especially if you can't meet any of these people in person. So while I still think it's the best option in general, it could actually be harder than ever to do that, despite the fact you can technically try contact everyone now. Which brings me on to number 5. So crowdfunding is kind of similar to the latter in the fact that, again, a lot of people are looking for investment when there's not enough investors. But I think crowdfunding could certainly work. One of the issues is you kind of got to have something to offer the people who you're aiming to get investment off. So that could be a discount on a product or the first product free or something. You kind of need something to edge them in, which can certainly make it hard to do if your product or service kind of isn't offering something like that where that can actually be attained. The other problem with crowdfunding is really, from what I could see, you need a very good social media following. You need to be out there, you need to have eyes on what you're doing to basically attract you to your crowdfunding page, of which there are many other people are doing it. So if you don't have a social media following, the chances of your crowdfunding page taking off, I think, is probably quite slim. Which brings me on to the conclusion of what I think you're probably better off doing if you're in the UK, try to get funding, and that is now what I'm trying to do, which is basically build things up on social media wise. For myself in particular, with what I'm doing, it's more on YouTube here, but it could be on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, whatever. If you can gain status and notoriety in society, you should at least be able to get yourself in the right rooms to try and get investment later on. But when you can get ad revenue off things like YouTube, or you can sell merch or Patreons or whatever it is, there's actually an opportunity for you to earn more money from doing the social media things, certainly a lot more than they used to be. When you add that into the fact that people are wanting to put less money into investments than they used to do, and the money doesn't go as far, you could probably earn the same money doing things on social media as the investment you could get if you go down the investment route. So to sum up, do I think you should have a go and actually try to find investment in 2025 in the UK? Well, I think you should try. It's just I would watch how much time you're putting into it, because your time could probably be better allocated somewhere else. That is a conclusion I came to around the end of spring last year, when I looked at it and thought, right, I've spent months trying to do this. Every spare minute I've tried to contact someone, do whatever. I could have put this time into YouTube or something else and got a lot further with that by now. And in hindsight, I would have been better off not even bothering and just spent the time doing that. So yeah, rounding up, funding programs have an extremely narrow corridor to actually get to the funding, making it difficult for you to get. British pessimistic behaviour, which you can't really do anything about in this country, will constantly try to hold you back, particularly from contacting the right people, which then affects startup help programs and how effective they can actually be. Angel investors, VCs, unless you know someone, they're extremely hard to access, and there's basically just too many people looking for funding. Same goes for crowdfunding, which means you need social media, which then begs the question, do you just do things on social media and earn this money from social media if you're having to put the time into it to build notoriety and status for yourself? Now, I know that isn't a particularly positive outlook on all of this if you are looking as you go into 2025, but that was my experience. I want to be as honest as possible so you can make the right decision in 2025 if you are looking in the UK. With that being said, with whatever venture you are taking on in 2025, I hope you are successful with it. I'm sure if you are determined enough and work hard enough, eventually you'll make it happen. My final advice is basically don't waste time on people too much. You've got AI, you've got YouTube, Google, all of it. If you find yourself essentially spending days trying to get in contact with other people, it's probably not worth the time. Particularly when you could be learning new things, developing new skills, making new products, doing things online. Due to these fantastic resources like AI and YouTube, it basically means that an individual's knowledge isn't worth that much. So if you're spending days doing it, then it's not worth it. With that being said, best of luck. If you're interested in anything else on the channel, please like and subscribe. I hope to see you in the next video, and have a great day.